I also, yeah. Yeah, it's a struggle bus.
Hey guys. Welcome to Cinema Bias. It's a brand new episode of Cinema Bias with one of your hosts. That is me, Video Drew. We also have another host here. Right here. Yeah, we got it. Yeah. It's Alex Mack.
Hello. I'm so super psyched to chat about this movie in particular. This is going to be
Yeah.
a weird one, a fun one. There's a lot to dive into with this movie in particular.
Yeah.
So,
Before
gonna
we
get
get to that, though,
intense.
this is Cinema Bias. If you haven't been here before, hey, Weston, elbow cough. I don't know what that means. I just want to say that Streamlabs are open tonight. Streamlabs.com/VideoDrew. We are donating the proceedings for this tonight and the rest of the month to Smash Cancer. Kevin Smith's GoFundMe for his upcoming battle royale. So yeah, please drop in a couple bucks. That'd be sweet. Hey, Lon. Tonight we're talking about Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But before we even get to that, we have another thing to say, which is if you haven't been here before, this is Cinema Bias. Hi, welcome, hello. This is a show where we explore each other's, me and Alex explore, sometimes with guests, sometimes not, each other's inherent biases towards certain kinds and against certain kinds of film, certain kinds of cinema. So this is being the month of October. We've done a bunch of spooky films, which means Alex has been in the hot seat a little bit more than I have as the lover of spooky things over here. But tonight's entry is a little bit different. This is a movie that I've seen that I never quite connected with, but Alex had a different experience with when she saw it for the first time 2 weeks ago. And that's a Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So before we get into that, this is like my name of the game today. Before we get into that, Alex, why don't we talk a little bit about what your bias is? Why didn't you ever see Texas Chainsaw Massacre?
I don't like horror movies. That's my bias. It wasn't until this year that I actually started to watch horror movies. That's been my bias towards the horror genre in general, especially slashers in particular. Growing up, slashers were always a little extra terrifying to me compared to, say, supernatural horror or things like that, or monster movies. Just because even though it's not more realistic usually, but I mean at the same time it's based in real time. It's based off of genuine fear, especially with the idea of being a single woman or just being a woman. Let's face it, women and slashers in particularly, it has a really weird relationship, in general. With women and slashers is what created the whole final girl trope that we know and arguably love today.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you say that. It's fine to hear you put this kind of point on it because I never realized it before. But I think I've had an aversion to slasher movies most of my life. I love horror movies, but I'm starting to realize there's a distinction even between psychological thriller or thriller movies and like just the idea of horror movies that are definitely horror but fall into slasher horror, which is horror that could plausibly happen to you because it's just some guy going around chopping people up. I'm talking your Black Christmases, your Friday the 13th, your Texas Chainsaw Massacres. These aren't the movies that particularly appeal to me either. I think my take has always been I just don't like gore. Like I love horror, but I don't like gore. I like horror that's implied and implicit, haunted houses, ghosts, scary stuff that can happen, demons, whatever, no problem. But the moment you get to a bone breaking or anything that's like sort of torture porny, like I really, my whole thing just turns off and I'm like, I don't want to see this. So watching horror movies with a couple people like Lon or with NerdChronic, I think they've like gotten this weird sense where I'm like, I love horror movies. And then I'm like, turn it off. I can't watch it. Like, I don't want to see this. But let's see. So Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a very famous movie by Tobe Hooper. This is kind of what got him his one could argue not actual director role for Poltergeist. There's a lot going on here. This movie was nigh incomprehensible to me until I watched it for this Cinema Bias, and they've watched it with the remastered audio, because my biggest issue with this movie has always been forever that you cannot understand anything that anybody is saying. The mixing was so poor. But yeah, we watched it again last night. Interesting to get into it. But before we can you tell me in 60 seconds, this should be pretty good, because this is a kind of short film that follows some logical just beats. But I'm interested to hear your take on who these people are to each other, because I have been always confused. Let's get 60 seconds. Tell me the plot.
Yeah, okay. It takes place in Deep South. When I say Deep South, I mean Texas. And it's not going yet.
Oh, wait, hold on. Let's
But
see if we're going to get There we go. Let's get it. There we go. Go ahead.
all right, so it takes place in Texas. A group of late teens, maybe early 20s, kind of kids. A few of them are related, and they're doing a little road trip. And they end up come across a hitchhiker guy that's like, hey, he's kind of freaking them out, and he's like, yeah, just take me to my family house, that kind of thing. And they end up having a weird experience with him where he ends up like cutting himself and like trying to cut someone else, and it gets really, really weird. Anyway, okay, so the people end up like going into someone's private property, ends up being not so much haunted, but they find a lot of skeletons everywhere. Families, they're cannibals. It turns out the family of that one hitchhiker guy, it comes down to they start killing everyone, and it comes down to the one girl, and the guy's like waving his chainsaw everywhere. So it's like really, it's about a cannibal family and a bunch of people running away from them.
That's good. That's good. There you go.
That's all it is. That's
all it is. That's
all it is.
That's top right there. Hey, Aaron. Aaron's going, this takes place in Texas? Yeah.
Texas. Yes.
Nobody better sully the good name of Leatherface. No one's going to sully Leatherface, which I also believe is one word, kind of like VideoDrew. Don saying, yeah, I'm all sorts of twisty mind fucky horror, not the gruesome kind. This movie is not particularly gruesome. I think that's a great explanation. Let me fill in a couple shades here. We did not mention, although it was implied, the iconic villain of this franchise, because this really goes on, and we can talk about that in a little bit. This how big the scope of this universe becomes, because it gets pretty big in the ensuing sequels. Leatherface. Leatherface is such an interesting horror villain. He's the one who, for most of the movie, you think that's who's stalking and killing the kids, because he is. He's got this big chainsaw. He's just rooming around. He's got this house, apparently, where he's got a bunch of aesthetic decor that looks like something that I would very much like to live in. It's all very like red walls and like cool skulls and like, I don't know, taxidermy. I've always been really into the Leatherface aesthetic, if not his value system or dietary plan. Then it turns out, so one of the girls, they dispatched the kids rather quickly. So there's this one guy in a wheelchair, which is never a great way to survive a horror film. And then there's I think it's his sister or his cousin. She's the one who becomes the final girl. Cousin. Yes, she runs away. She gets out of Leatherface's grip. She runs away to the kind of grocery store, the gas station where they had originally stopped, and they'd been like greeted by this kind of redneck but like seemingly nice dude. She runs in and she's like, hey, help me, Leatherface is after me. And he's like, okay, calm down. He like goes out the door. You leave the door open. It's this really scary shot where you think the Leatherface is going to come in. Instead, the dude comes in with a bunch of rope and starts like attacking her with a broom. Lo and behold, he's like Leatherface's like dad or I don't know, cousin. I don't know, part of that family. So he brings him home alongside. She brings her home alongside Leatherface, who's also there, like you mentioned, with the hitchhiker and their grandfather, who we thought was just a desiccated corpse in the attic, but no, is like actually alive somehow. Slaughterhouse family. So they try to give the grandfather the his last hurrah of getting to bash her over the brains, like he used to do in the slaughterhouse. But she escapes, runs out the door with the two guys following her, and one of them immediately gets run over by the truck. The giant semi. The semi stops. A guy gets out. Leatherface comes running after. The two of them do like a little silly chase around inside the bed of the car, inside the truck. Then another car stops, and she jumps in the bed of that. And Leatherface is left dancing alone with his chainsaw in the middle of the road. And one of my favorite whimsical, iconic shots in a horror movie is just the Leatherface just roaring with his chainsaw, dancing silly in the road. So yeah, that takes place. That takes care of the plot of the initial film. I will add that, like in the subsequent, because this is a fine enough place to do it. In the subsequent films, the legacy of, I think they're called the Sawyer family up until a certain point, and I think it deviates and turns back into another family name. This becomes like an extended Devil's Rejects sort of world where the real story becomes against the family of Leatherface and like his tribe versus the authority of the town of Texas, which is in Texas where they are, which, as you can imagine, it is small-minded in certain ways, or sort of pejorative, or they're not the greatest portrayal of cops or authority figures in small towns. It's definitely hitting on, especially in later movies, definitely hitting on a certain element of
Corruption,
in a couple of I think in the sequels,
racism,
I think that
sexism.
Racism isn't really addressed, I feel like, until you get Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3D. Even then, it's like weird, but it's mostly about like how these poor Southern people in positions of authority brutalize other poor Southern people that they consider white trash, and how that leads to things like burning down someone's house, or just like targeting and murdering people who didn't necessarily like do anything, and that in turn like makes them into violent killers. And Dennis Hopper gets involved, and Matthew McConaughey at a certain point, and Jessica Biel, and the whole series just becomes this big old mess. But I do think it has some really interesting things to say as a franchise about Southern culture, about deep red state, red deliverance style fear and paranoia, and our inherent biases. So yeah, let's get talking to. We're just talking though about this movie itself. Let's start with this one. How about put it in context? So what was this movie to you, Alex? Like, you had some thoughts on this.
There's been a lot of franchises I've been dying to watch. Like, I haven't seen any of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. I have not seen any of the Friday the 13th movies. And the thing is, I've been trying to find a way to watch a lot of these movies. The thing is, they're not available on any of the streaming services that I have. And I just discovered Tubi a little bit ago, and this movie is available. The original, it's available on Tubi, and so I was like, "Sweet Jesus, Tubi, thank you!" As well as the Tobe Hooper sequels, which I just binge watched like 3 of them in a night.
Okay, so you have seen the sequel. Okay, we can expand this a little bit.
I saw all the Tobe Hooper movie versions.
Ooh,
yes,
okay.
Sequels. The second and third one.
That's the Hopper one, and then I'm not sure if I've seen the third one. I've watched like a couple of these like kind of cram it style videos on them, and I've seen Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3D, which I do want to recommend. That movie has no right to be as good as it is. It's
my gosh, I expected trash.
It was good.
I loved it. Like, I actively loved that movie.
The part where like Alexandra Dario's like, "Do your thing, cuz," and then she throws the chainsaw at Leatherface, and he like catches it, and he's like, rah, 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 and you're like, "Oh shit!" And you're like, "Oh, Leatherface is the good guy." Oh hell yeah, that's so good.
No, my gosh, I was like, I had no idea where I was gonna go. I didn't know. The thing is, like I've kind of mentioned, a lot of my hesitation watching a lot of these major movies is just because like I've been spoiled for it like 10 million times. Why would I want to watch a movie where I know every single detail? Like, why? Right. However, I knew nothing about this movie going into it.
What, 3D?
Nothing. Right? The 3D, the 3D one. The 3D one, and so I was like, I also like I watched it the other day, and I was like, I love this so much. It's like an alternate reality reality sequel to the first one, which I really appreciated.
I think after Tobe Hooper, like it gets to the point where everything, they're revamping the reality of it. So in this reality, not to make this a 3D podcast, but this one is just so good that I think I'm so glad to hear you say that, because I feel like no one else that I watched this with agreed that this movie was bonkers incredible. But the 3D one exists in a world where they burned down the house. The sheriff burned down the house along with a bunch of townspeople of this family after they murdered ostensibly they murdered this after the events of this movie take place. And then that family was like traumatized and victimized. And then one of them had like a kid and the kid was given away. And the town, meanwhile, has been covering up this dirty little secret about like murdering a bunch of people, like, just the Southern fried justice thing. And so Leatherface actually turns out to be the good guy who ends up saving the final girl because they are related. Yeah.
That should have been the tagline for the movie. Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2013 or whatever it was. Southern fried justice. Or tagline or whatever maybe, because that is 100% should have been.
Do your thing, cuz is maybe the best, most well delivered, one of the top 5 I think most well delivered lines in a horror movie of all time. Do your thing, cuz. And it's
the thing is, we're not here to talk about the
no.
It's great as much as I loved it. Going back to the original though, there's a lot to really dive into though, because Tobe Hooper, there's a lot of really great things about it. The cinematography, I was surprised at how beautiful it was.
Mhm.
I found it very bright. I found it
Mm-hmm.
very lovely. The cinematography, a lot of the shots were quite stunning. It was very clear. The audio wasn't great, but no
No?
movie back then was great, you know, but it was definitely remastered. The one I listened to is remastered, so that definitely helped quite a bit.
Yeah, and it
But
still wasn't great, was it? Can you imagine what the original audio sounded like? It was like literally
I
listening to like,
can't.
like a home movie. Like
It's
it was
just
so
like
bad.
it's just a lot of like chainsaw roaring, you know.
Yeah, you can understand.
But
And anytime I've seen this movie, I've been like, who are these people and what are their relationships to each other? Because you couldn't understand the first half of the film.
Mhm.
It just sounded like
Yeah, and there would be like random little conversations talking about horoscopes and
yeah,
like
yeah,
things like that.
absolutely.
And you're not really sure about the relationship between a lot of these people. Anyway, but there's a lot of unique tropes to this movie that I don't want to say started the trend of certain tropes. I don't know if this movie started the final girl trope. I don't know if this movie started the whole Southern horror villain redneck trope. I don't
I
know if
know
that's the case.
Blueprints might have
but
been
it,
first.
yeah,
I can't remember
but
who's first. Yeah.
yeah, because I know like Spit on Your Grave and things like that. I think it
Revenge
might have
trope.
come out
Yeah.
earlier. Yeah, but it kind of
Well,
came
I
out
feel
around
like
that
it's a
time as
little bit
well.
it's not as much of a final girl because it's like I think she's the one who flips the tables on them and becomes like she becomes the thing that they're all scared of because she's taking revenge. But I get what you're saying. I actually
No,
let's see.
she does. I mean, she doesn't. I mean, like in the sequels, sure, but in the
It's always
first
been a
one
revenge thing. Hasn't
specifically,
it always been a
the
revenge
first
story?
one. No, I mean the first one she's not. It's literally her actively running away the entire time. She's never
Oh,
going back to go kill him or rescue someone.
oh, I might have misunderstood that. So this was in let's see, I'm just looking it up right now. This movie is 1974.
Mhm.
So yeah, I feel like this was one of the first ones. This was definitely
Yeah,
predates any of the slasher stuff. Like this predates
it's
Nightmare on Elm Street. This predates
mhm.
Friday the 13th. This predates a
Mhm.
lot of them. Yeah.
It arguably is the very first slasher. I think it is this movie that actually recreated the idea of like the horror genre of the
I
slasher
love
because
it.
essentially because it's focused on the horror aspect, but the murders and you know things like that, where it's not like it's not like a psychological thriller
Well,
like Psycho or anything like
well,
that.
1974 was a big year. It would be between this and Black Christmas, which also came out this year. And Black
Yeah.
Christmas was the first movie to really introduce that idea of like that. I think that movie is also credited a lot as beginning the final girl trend of it being like a house full of chicks. It's also like the first one where it's sort of like the call is coming from inside the house. I mean, The Babysitter, which was an earlier film, but it really that's the one that gets a lot of credit for being the beginning of the slasher genre, I guess. I don't know why like Texas Chainsaw Massacre isn't considered higher on that list because they came out apparently around the same time. But
They came
yeah,
out the same year, I
yeah,
think.
they came out the same year.
It's maybe it came out like the point is though overall is that there is one girl at the very end and she is like the survivor. She's also compared to an angel towards the beginning of the film when she goes to like her grandpa's tombstone kind of thing, and there's like a handful of comments talking about how beautiful and bright and golden her hair is, and the sun is like shining down on her. It looks quite lovely. That's not her, but that's the other girl. But something that kind of I think was kind of interesting is that, like you said, this didn't really so much introduce the concept of the final girl, but the entire time in this movie, she's constantly and she is constantly I don't want to say on the run, because she obviously is on the run towards later on, but at the beginning she's never feels like she's a character at ease, if that makes sense.
Oh
She's
yeah,
like constantly like she's always looking for someone. She's I don't want to say she's fighting with her brother or cousin or whatever, but she has like she's kind of teasing him at a bunch of points. So she's never like chill, if that makes sense.
Can I tell you a fun fact?
Please.
Black Christmas and Texas Chainsaw Massacre came out the same day.
What?
October 11th, 1974. That's really creepy. Like, ooh, like that's really weird. They came out the exact same day. And it did significantly better than Black Christmas upon initial release, I think.
Yeah.
So interesting.
Yeah.
So Yeah, I think a lot of people had issues with this violence because this is also one of the goriest, I think, films that we had up until this point. The final girl stuff is really interesting because what this movie does, I think, a lot better than a lot of even more recent versions of the slasher trope are dispatch of everyone else kind of immediately, so you're only left with her.
Yes.
You know, it kind of is just like everyone else is sort of like dispensable, and they're immediately dispensed with. Like, it's not like, let's take some time to focus on who these people are, their relationship. It's like, no, everyone else is gone. It's just her, and we're just focusing on her fear, her panic. You know, a lot of the arguments against final girl movies is that it's voyeuristic and it's fetishizing the idea of women, you know, in extreme levels of distress, which is pretty, you know, as a woman, like, it's pretty hard to watch these movies because it's just like, you know, it'll be 20 minutes of somebody just like this woman just screaming while being attacked by these, you know, men, these predatory men. Like, this is not fun for me. Like, I'm not having a fun time imagining this situation.
I have been told by women that have been in very with women that have had PTSD through you know, abusive relationships and you know victims of of assault, they have mentioned that they actually find horror movies very therapeutic. And I was like, I'm really curious about that. I'm like, why would you want to rewatch? If anything, shouldn't you be like X-nay on the horror movie, you know? And they said it's actually very therapeutic because a lot of these horror movies, they really not only dive into, they not only take advantage of that idea, but you're also, the purpose of the movie is that a lot of horror movies is that because you're focused on, there's so much focus on the final girl, essentially, it kind of forces the audience to not only like sympathize or empathize for the character for her, but you have no other choice but to over sympathize for her character and considering her situation. Like otherwise a lot of maybe some men might not really care about the female characters unless it was a female in such an extreme situation. But they've also mentioned, at the very end, especially a lot of horror movies like The Descent and everything, it's very symbolic about women coming through a lot of these situations, whether it be PTSD, cutting through horrible issues with abuse or sexual assault. I spit on your grave, and finding a way to retrieve your strength and survive, essentially, and pull yourself together, where you figure out a way to survive and also beat the system, essentially. And so in that way, that they've kind of told me that's why they like to watch these movies, because they find it so therapeutic.
Yeah,
seeing other women survive in these situations.
It's really good to hear that. It's like a very good reclaiming, because these movies were not made. Like, I'll just be honest, I love Wes Craven, I love Toby Hooper, I love all these guys, but these guys didn't make movies to be like, hey, let's talk about the feminist agenda about women surviving and thriving. It's very much like the line from Cabin in the Woods, or like the plot point in Cabin in the Woods, where it's like, it doesn't matter if the final girl dies or lives, she just has to suffer. And that's basically what the concept has always been in slasher movies, is the final girl can live, she can survive and win, or she can die. But the fact is that she has to suffer, and she has to suffer for the second half of the movie, and it has to just be her. And it's always, very Jamie Lee Curtis, never took her top off until Trading Places, but a lot of them, were sexualized and it was over the top, like boobs, and it was this gratuitous is the word I'm looking for. It's always been this sort of gratuitous linkage between sexuality and
survival,
or death,
Yeah, well, I mean, there's this idea. I mean, it's even mentioned in Scream, even so, that, you can't survive a horror movie if you have had sex. So avoid sex at all costs. There's a reason why in a lot of horror movies, the quote unquote virgins are the ones that survive. And it's even, like you said, it's mentioned in A Cabin in the Woods. This movie in particular, because it's really not only interesting because of, the whole idea of the final girl. She's constantly trying to run and just leave and figure this out. But thing is, and even the simulated rape scene, which I thought was really weird. But well, thing is, I read it as a potential rape scene, essentially. Okay, so Okay, so she runs away to the gas station, right? And she's like, "Oh my gosh, help me!" And the guy is like, "Yeah, there." And things. He starts hitting her with the broom, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay, so you're seeing it. So the camera is like from behind. So you're watching it from his point of view. So it kind of swaps from her point of view to his point of view, right? But at the end, it focuses on his point of view where he's hitting her with the broom, and you're kind of staying up top. Meanwhile, you see him getting lower and lower on top of her, hitting her.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, she's trying to claw away, and he's like hitting her with a slightly phallic thing. You know, it's definitely not. It's not a technical rape scene, but and he kind of crouches around her, and it felt very similar to like how rape scenes are shown. Thing is, this movie tried to be a PG movie. Really? it tried to be a PG movie because it's going to be shown more in theaters, things like that. Because the PG-13 rating wasn't around. Right. Jaws was rated PG. And so they tried to make it. Thing is, they actually initially filmed a rape scene. But they cut it out. They did. No, they said they did. And I looked at it, I was like, really? And then I was like, oh, said that's how they figured it out. And so they cut it. And then, so I wonder if they might have filled that in its place as a result. And they ended, because of the tone of the movie, they still made it an R, but still.
I think the thing about this movie, about that one scene that's so disturbing and it's such a disruption and works in a way that like a rape scene would, I'm really glad they cut this out, is that the jarring disconnect between some friendly guy or a figure that you're going to for help, who immediately then, like this friendly face, who then turns on you and starts hurting you and starts like, he's jabbing at her. He keeps her in the truck and he keeps saying these disconnected things like, you're going to be okay. Like, we'll get you through this. You'll like survive. Like he keeps saying, just be quiet now. Like everything's gonna be okay now. And then he'll like jab her like maniacally with this broom while she's like stuck in a bag and start like giggling. And it's so horrifying and it's so creepy to hear somebody be like, it's okay. Like, we're going to take care of you. Like everything's gonna be okay, while like doing this incredibly insane, and then like, doing this really intense, like mouth screwed up, intensely intense kind of violence. While hearing her scream, it's sort of like, I can't imagine the kind of people that this would titillate. A lot of people, like, that's the argument, is like why these movies should come out, is like because people get off on it. And it's like, I can't imagine that really being the reaction to seeing this kind of horrible, violation occur. But Jesus, I don't know.
Yeah, I read that scene right away as like as a potential rape scene, and it wasn't until later I was talking with a friend of mine, and he's like, and he it didn't even occur to him, and I don't know if it's something that I would only catch on as like a woman. But I mean, like, to me, it was like glaringly obvious. But I feel like I think that happens a lot in like a lot of old movies, like the pseudo gang rape scene in West Side Story. But that's a whole other conversation. Yeah. I do kind of want to also, it's the introduction where the concept of cannibals in the movie, because you see them killing people and everything up until then, but it wasn't until you see that little close up of the barbecue situation, and you see like a torso, you see a few limbs, you see a boob, and you're suddenly connecting the dots, and
so and it's real scary.
Yeah, absolutely. And you remember for a split second, hey, this guy offered you barbecue at the beginning of the movie. And it's at that point for her, she's connecting the dots as well. But at the same time, she is frantic. She's freaking out. She is like bloody and everything. And so she's not this bloody yet, but she is like freaking out, obviously.
This is like a Carrie ending. She's like over it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, like it's definitely one of those, it's the big transition moment for her character.
Yeah, I would say this is what me and Lon would call a real Baskin movie, which is a term for horror movies that involve somebody eating tainted meat and it turns out to be human. No, it's a term for a lot of things, but Baskin being a Turkish horror film that is incredibly disturbing. I would not recommend it for you, Alex. It's a recent film, but yeah, I think there's a lot there. There's a lot here too about, like, as much as I like to hate on the audio quality of this film, there's so much that they do, that Tobe Hooper does cinematically, just in the framing of the shots, the colors that he uses, the way that there are certain like directions that he gives that makes the movie so much creepier than it would normally be. Like the first scene where the guy's like walking into the home, like when it's still everyone's still alive, and he walks into this house, and you see there's like a normal house, like a normal foyer, and then there's like a meat locker, like chute entrance almost. And you can see some stuff dangling. You can see some bones and stuff dangling. And he goes like, hello, who's there? There's some rustling. And then he does what is effectively the weirdest move in a horror movie ever, which is he then starts running full speed towards the door, like into the house, towards the metal chute, trips, and like falls into the room and then Leatherface comes out and bonks him on the head. And I've read before that is one of like the craziest like shots in a horror movie, because like the idea of like seeing something like that, this is before there was all that Scream meta horror of being like, don't go up there, or like, why would you do that, or don't have sex. There weren't rules yet like that. But the idea is still that you would go into someone else's house, see some bones in like a very scary secret paneled room, and go, time to like run towards it. Like that's just such a creepy move, and it adds to such a sense of like, don't do that. Like you want to scream at him, like don't, maybe don't do that. Last night, Eric was like, NerdChronic was like, maybe it's because they needed to get him enough momentum so he's running so he can trip and fall. I think the fall might have been unplanned. I can't remember if that was true. If the fall itself was unplanned, or if that was part of it. People fall a lot in this movie. This is also like one of those, everyone's constantly like the klutziest protagonist or villain that you could possibly find. Falling downstairs. They're just jump. She's jumping out of windows like constantly. I caught her 2 or 3 just like straight through like the sheet glass window jumps from her. It's pretty amazing.
Absolutely. The sheer athleticism, behind a lot of horror movie characters, it's nuts. Under complete being in situation, those definitely give a lot of motivation to run as fast as you can for as far as you can, and away from danger, but also it's kind of funny you say that, because actually when I saw that scene, I actually laughed.
Really? That's funny.
I actually was like, haha, idiot. And I understand. I understand. It's like now if it was shown in a movie, it would be like really meta. It would be obvious and everything. But watching this for like in a movie where it doesn't have that, I'm like, fucking idiot. I also like watching this movie. I get very frustrated with a lot of the main characters.
Tell me.
Because my first thought was I grew up on military bases my entire life, and this whole idea of crossing property is complete without permission completely annoys me. I'm like, no, it's not your property. You don't cross it. Why the heck would you cross it? It says private. You don't go in. You just don't. You don't go into someone else's house. You just don't.
One could argue that this entire movie could be saying that these kids hadn't pulled like a "Don't Breathe" and decided to like break into other people's homes.
Exactly. So when I hear that, I'm just like annoyed, because they're just like going through the cars, and sure, they're having a hard time trying to find a friend. But even if I had a hard time trying to find my friend, it would never occur to me to be like go into someone else's house and be like, yo, is my person here? No. Like, no.
By the way, hi, Trevor. Hi, Trevor. I'm not sure if Trevor's has watched Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and if not, go to bed. But no, this movie definitely has that thing too, where I constantly, when I was growing up or seeing this movie, I assumed that the guy in the wheelchair, because he mentions that his dad or his uncle maybe had owned the slaughterhouse. And so I think they're going to the property of, it's his property, or like one of the places is, I think the guy in the wheelchair's family property, and it just borders on the Leatherface family property. So like one of the places is theirs. They're like, because it's like how they're talking in the beginning about the desecration of the bodies, like somebody's been dragging up bodies and like doing all this stuff. And we later find out it's the very clearly James Franco looking kid. Can we just say that about the hitchhiker? Dude is just James Franco meets Adam Driver. It's the weirdest freaking look.
You're totally right. When I first saw him, I was like, could he be like low key related to Adam Driver? They both have very similar looks with the hair, the larger nose. It has like it's a very specific look, which is kind of interesting, but speaking of which, when it comes to iconic aesthetics, that's him. Yeah. He's the kind of, like the really big smile, everything. Yes. And that's totally looks to me like Adam Driver, but
the guy.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Watching this, Oh yeah, yeah. Watching this movie, and also with the sequels as well and everything, it doesn't occur to me that Leatherface is the villain. To me,
No,
Leatherface is not the villain.
He's really not.
He's
He's
not.
really the most abused member of that family. He's also, if you
Yeah.
notice, because a lot of times he's dressed in drag. Like he's the one who has to cook and clean. There's no female member of this family that we see in the original movie. But we see Leatherface at the end doing the cooking, wearing an apron and with makeup smeared on his face, on his leather face.
His woman's mask. It's called. It's referenced as like his lady mask or girl mask or something like that.
Really?
Once or twice in the movie.
Part.
Yeah, it was like referenced as that. But it's also referenced in the sequels as well, the Toby Hopper sequels. And it was kind of interesting to me because, when I even seeing it for the first time, it's very clear to me and it was like reaffirmed several times throughout the movie that he's a person that with a person with mental disabilities. And for one thing, he doesn't say anything. He communicates, however, he doesn't actually speak. Or he has a hard time speaking, and like the way he kind of goes about things, he doesn't do anything without direction. Everything he does is reactionary, so he's not killing people just to kill people. He's killing someone because you're breaking into his property. And you're in the state of Texas. What do you think is going to happen?
I never thought about that, but yeah, actually, no, wait.
What do you think is going to happen?
When we were watching the movie, I was like, well, this is very relevant. I'm like, he's basically doing one of those hold your ground, stand your ground laws. Yeah. Like, it's like, he's not using a gun, but you broke into his house. No. So he has the right to kill you by Texas. This is
like, I would be curious to see like the people from The Purge go up against this family. Let's see what that would be like. One's actively entering, only discovers the cannibal family.
I mean, that would be the Don't Breathe scenario of like, the prey becomes the predator. I mean, I think what's really interesting too, I mean, it's not really, again, addressed in this movie. It's kind of built out over the subsequent, the Dennis Hopper ones and in 3D and stuff. But it's like, they're not in a great part of the country. They're in a pretty deliverance-y kind of area where like justice is not something you do through the courts. Justice is something you take into your own hands. And so by that logic, this family has a right to be on their property and they have a right to shoot, like to murder and kill any trespassers, because how do they know those kids aren't coming to like take away their stuff, and by that logic, I guess the police have the they have the right to come and burn your house down because they think you're like redneck incest weirdo families.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I have family in Texas, and I say and the thing is, I live in Ferguson and in Missouri, very close to within St. Louis, and I'm a gun owner. And thing is, if someone's coming into my house,
whoa, what kind?
I have a 7mm.
Whoa. Okay, cool.
I think
literally no judgment.
Anyway, but
cool. But teach their own.
Yeah, no, the thing is, and I know how to shoot and everything. Anyway, but thing is, if you're coming into my private property without knocking, without any kind of encouragement on my behalf, I have totally every right to do that as a form of protection, as precautionary. Absolutely. You can be suspected whatever's going on around you, based off like my skulls and everything, and all that's absolutely justified you to be completely suspect, but you can't come into my house.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't come into my house unless you see me actively doing something bad, and they didn't. So that makes it really iffy. But it's kind of weird how the big takeaway from this movie isn't you see it on the covers and everything. You don't really hear about like the cannibalistic families and things like that. But absolutely. But the big takeaway of the movie is the absolute fear-mongering Leatherface. He is considered the villain, the true villain of this movie, and I don't really understand why, because he is clearly a person with mental disabilities. And I looked it up, and actually the actor that portrayed him, I can't remember his name, is something Gunner. He said he actually studied people with mental disabilities for this character. It's for this character. And so when I see this, and I'm like, what is this the commentary of this movie? Like, the reason why he is doing this behavior is because of this?
I think it's a pretty, first of all, there's several things. One is that this character is based on, and this is like something that Toby Hooper confirmed, it's very loosely based on Ed Gein, who was a serial killer back in the 40s or I think like 30s or 40s. He's 30s also, and 40s. Yeah, so he was, but you know who else was based on Ed Gein? Hannibal Lecter.
Psycho.
Who else was based on Ed Gein? Norman Bates. Yeah, and who else was based on Ed Gein? Buffalo Bill. Like, there are so many things in horror movies that are based off of Ed Gein, and that's only to say that Ed Gein was this person in American culture. He only killed like a couple women, but what he did that was so gruesome and like it's made everything stand out like Jack the Ripper was that he dug up bodies, he ate people, and he turned like their skin, mostly women, into like lampshades, into like he made stuff into like taxidermy, like you see in this movie. He was also, though, like unlike Hannibal Lecter and like a couple of these other people that we attribute to being Gein, like he was pretty mentally slow. Like he was not a quick on the uptake person. He was very close with his mother, whose murder he was suspected of.
His character in he was never described as someone who was like particularly smart or anything. He was educated. He also he was emotionally and physically abused by his family. And he was also isolated quite a bit, by his family, who like rained, the Bible on him.
Real quick, I do want to mention, apparently I've been hearing like what I thought was gunshots going off for the last 5 minutes, freaking out, like internally being like, it's okay, Drew. It does seem like in the comments it is because the Dodgers won the World Series. Is that what just happened? Is that what just happened? Because there's just tons of fireworks and stuff, just like everyone here who's like in the LA area is like hearing it right now. There's just tons of like fireworks going off right now. Crazy. But good job, Dodgers. Go Dodgers.
Good job. Good job, Dodgers. Yeah, good for them. It's just kind of the thing is, it's kind of an interesting commentary. Like, that's the thing is also, I feel very conflicted as well, because I was reading up, and like I said, the actor that portrayed Leatherface, because, there's a point where, with the makeup and everything, where he is, does have mental disabilities. Is that a commentary on, and also he has been such brainwashed, manipulated by his family with no outside connections, as well, that he became this way. And what he's doing in his mind, he is protecting his family, and he is killing people because that's what his family kind of told him to do. So I don't like when I see his character, I don't think he's a villain at all. If anything, his dad and older brother, they're the real villains of the movie. However, they don't have like the same villainous aesthetic that he has, and that's what kind of bothers me a little bit. But not only that he is like based off of person with disability, but also he was not inspired, but literally the actor portrayed him. He based the physicality, the way he moved, the way he spoke, based off his people with disabilities as well. And so that kind of bothers me a little bit. I also know, apparently, I have been told, scratch that, I have not been told, but I read that the actor also was the actor that played him. Also, a lot of people that have disabilities have told him in particular they loved his portrayal of the disabilities on the big screen in that way. Really? So I was like, oh yeah. So I read that and I was like, really? What?
Well, I guess maybe because it doesn't seem like it's a specific type of disability. Yeah. It doesn't seem like the movie, like the very early movie Freaks, that was like, the horror isn't that he's mentally handicapped or physically handicapped in any way. The horror is this weird family unit and the sort of sense that something is very, very wrong here. Even the way they interact with each other, there's something like very wrong with it. Like the way that they're okay 1 second, and then the next second they're like beating up on each other. And the dad or like the guy who runs the gas station is like, like giggling 1 second and then like, oh, I can't stand blood, like I can't stand the violence, like I'll just have to go to the kitchen like the next second.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, these people don't live by a coherent logic, like, and that's terrifying. These people don't live by the same rules or like not even societal systems. You get a sense that these people are truly insane in the sense of the word of like, they can maybe function like very low functioning, like on like a human scale, because as you see in the opening scene with the James Franco character, he cannot act normal. Like he also comes off as very handicapped in a certain way. Like you don't know what's wrong with him, but he clearly is not all mentally there, and he's clearly not all right, you know?
He's absolutely, I mean, it's definitely it's a situation where they were made into these these psychotic cannibals. They weren't born that way, clearly. But also it's like it's mentioned, it's been kind of mentioned, it's kind of suggested in the movie that they're products of incest. In the sequel, it's it's actually mentioned, it's kind of in the sequel, in the second one with Dennis Hopper. It's kind of there is a like a simulated sex scene, essentially, with this chainsaw where he's like, with this chainsaw, and he's getting closer and closer to a girl's like vagina with the chainsaw. Meanwhile, when they're in a record store, and she's like, yeah.
Oh my god!
And he's like getting closer and closer with the chainsaw. So I'm like, I know what you're doing.
What happened?
I don't like it, but I see what you're doing.
What happened? First of all,
and she was like, she was going along with it. She like out of straight fear, and she was like, yeah, this is good. Yeah, out of complete fear. That's how she's reacting. And he decides that he doesn't kill her. And this is like this is like not even halfway in the movie, but he ends up deciding, because of that reaction, he decides not to kill her. And so and he decides to like walk away. And also he also like references, she goes to him actually in the sequel towards the very end, trying to find him, essentially. So it's kind of a weird thing. He sees her and he tries to give her a mask. He gives her a mask to put on. And it's almost like a weird, funny moment where he's trying to bond
with her. First of all, thank you, Ferris, for your donation. That's also very sweet. Thank you, Ferris. I think Leatherface stands out to me as such a like interesting. The more I see this, and especially not to keep circling back to this Alexander Daddario movie, but it's so much better, guys. I can't recommend it highly enough. I think it's so much better than even the original film. But it makes him into such an interesting slasher figure because he is not all bad, and I think that's what we're getting from like the canon is that he. Maybe not all bad, but he, unlike Jason, who just is a predatory kill instinct, and unlike Freddy Krueger, who is an active sadist, he Leatherface is somebody who can pick and choose and has like a like not a heart, but like a compass that can be swayed.
He has a moral system.
Yeah, he can be sympathized with, or like he can sympathize with you. He can sympathize with family. When he sees that somebody's his cousin, he like immediately like takes saves them. It seems like as long as you don't run away from them like and scream like at him, like he might actually have some tenderness towards you. It's a really interesting concept, because I think that's speaking to probably more of a vision of how people thought of crazy ancestral mentally handicapped, these people could be dangerous. Oh wow, whoa, Ferris, thank you, my man, thank you for that huge donation.
Ferris,
fucking awesome. Ferris, by the way, who last bunch of debates compared me to Annabelle doll, got that straight win, by the way. But then I had nightmares about Annabelle that entire night. Like I had the weirdest dreams about Annabelle.
He performed amazing on Schmoedown. He swept the entire thing, winning all 3 debates. I was like, wham bam,
if we could harness Ferris's like energy, his intense energy for arguing everything. I feel like it could be like the best new segment for like something that in the VideoDrew universe is just Ferris just like yelling his opinion about like hamburgers versus hot dogs. I would love to hear it. Like just anything.
I would say I kind of want to hear Justin Hamilton go up against Ferris on a Schmoedown. That'd be funny.
Oh my god! But just like really insane topics, like who's better, Freddy versus Jason, and just have them just screaming at each other.
Oh my gosh! Yeah, I mean, like it would have to be complete lunacy in that match. Well, I mean, okay, so something that's kind of interesting about the sequels, because like I said, the Toby Hopper sequels, Hooper Hopper, Tomato sequels, is that there is this like real, it plays more on the horror comedy elements. There's a lot of neon colors everywhere. It kind of reminds me of like Gotham City, like from the 90s Batman Joel Schumacher movies. It's like weird, the colors, like there's a huge layer on made labyrinth situation underground that the family made. It kind of takes, there's a chili cook-off where they're in a city. It's really, really funky. There's like bright lights everywhere. It's really funky. There's just casually like skeletons hanging out everywhere. But it's really, really funny. Also, like a woman at the very end, she pretty much does like a striptease dance holding a chainsaw, and she like finds her power and a lot of her resiliency and everything by wielding and taking hold of this chainsaw. It's a really empowering moment for her.
Yeah, it's almost like phallic imagery. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, it's taking back that power, which I really, really appreciate, especially coming from that, that scene earlier in the movie that I kind of mentioned. No. Well, that's like thing is that's like one timeline, sequel timeline to the original 73 Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The 2013 one, Texas Chainsaw 3D, however, it's like an alternate timeline with a completely different situation. There is no cannibalistic family. It's just him that has a history for killing people, and he's like they're also from a wealthy family as well, not like a poor country.
I believe what it is that the sheriff had burned down the house where the original cannibal. So the events of the first film took place as they did. What happened was the woman. There was a sister involved that was there. I think maybe that's even part of the second one.
The wife.
She has a kid, and what she does is she marries into wealth, and then she's taking care of Leatherface her entire life. So he's living in the basement. So she's wealthy. The family was poor. And they built the house on the remains of where they burned the prior house down. I think that's right. It's a little confusing in the movie. So her daughter becomes the mother of Daddario's character. So I think that's the correct chronological event.
Yeah, I mean that sounds about right. But there is this relationship between Leatherface and the family where it's it's not as, where it's arguably not as poisonous, where she isn't cannibalistic, she's not slowly bringing victims over for him to kill and everything. Where Leatherface, he has this revenge list essentially, where people he wants to kill as revenge against, people that destroyed his home, people that killed all of his family, his brothers, his parents, and everything that were protecting themselves, and they were outsiders, and there were outsiders as well.
They're outsiders, exactly. Well, that's another thing too, the idea of kin and the idea of like tribalism and the idea of like who's outsiders and who's like in the tribe. I think Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3D also brings up an interesting thing, which is the first person who dies in that movie is a hitchhiker. Nice little echo to the original. Is a hitchhiker that they pick up, who then proceeds to like convince them to all leave the house and like go get supplies, while he goes and robs the entire place, and Leatherface comes across him and just like is like, what the fuck are you doing, man? Like, what the fuck? Like, what are you doing, man? Like, there's another guy just breaking into his property and stealing his stuff. Like, it's still Texas. He still has a right to like chainsaw him. Like, imagine if it was a gun and not a chainsaw, it would be legal. That's the weirdest thing about these movies.
Well, that's the thing. There's nothing illegal about owning a chainsaw. It's just about how you go about it. Technically.
Power to people afterwards. And, that's a little bit more of a problem. Okay.
Yeah. It's just kind of, we were so confused. There's, okay. Something that's kind of interesting that we haven't really touched on is that there is this slightly supernatural element to the movie. And that is specifically with the grandfather.
Yes. What is going? Is he wearing a mask or is that his skin?
The thing is, he's moving on his own. He's blinking and stuff. He is in theory alive, even though he's
a mask. Though I think his skin looks like that, but I think it's a mask of somebody else's skin, just like the Leatherface is wearing a mask. Because like that thing is a desiccated husk. That's not a person.
Yeah.
In fact, we know that doesn't look like a person because earlier in the film, somebody goes up to that room and they see him and they see a woman who's like a half-embodied skeleton, which is the corpse that was dug up by
the wife.
I think that was probably the mom. Yeah, dug up by James Franco character. but we assume that these are just two dead bodies, like because
Yes.
the guy is just a husk. It was like just like actually like a
He's like waxy. Yeah, he's completely white. You know, he's dressed in a suit. Like the hair is gone. He's not moving at all. And then he's like brought into the living room to like bash in her head as like for one last go. And it's a reference to earlier in the movie where he says that, you know, oh, my grandpa, he used to work there, you know, in the good old days where they used to just like bash their heads in instead of like
that kind of kashrut law thing going on where they're just like you know, it's got to be killed a certain way, and it's such a creepy scene though when, you know, they have her bent over a tub and they're getting the grandpa and they're taking his hand. Leatherface is helping, you know, and he's taking his hand, his grandfather's hand that's shaking. He's trying to get the grandfather to bash her head in, but like it is really reminiscent of these
slipping out.
It keeps slipping out. It's almost reminiscent. It becomes this almost like weirdly tender, not tender, but you become this sympathetic moment. Who hasn't had like a grandparent who is near like the end of their life, who's failing in a lot of ways, and you have to keep helping them do a task or put something back in their hand. But it's like this weird moment because they're like being like, no, grandpa, like bash your brains in, you know, like how you like to bash things brains in. But it is this weirdly tender or like human moment in an otherwise horrific scene, and I think that like ends up heightening the horror of it because it is just sort of like, what are they doing? Like, what is this a real family? Like, what is this?
Absolutely. It's really funky as well because, you know, as you kind of see Leatherface like, oh, here you're having this moment, like he's not speaking obviously, but he's pretty much going, here you go, grandpa, you're whatever, and he does that like 6 times. Meanwhile, it just keeps slipping out of his hands, or he just misses, or whatever it may be, or he's like barely tapping her on the head, and so the moment gets prolonged, and so her fear in part specifically it just becomes heightened, where it's just like it's keep going, you know, it's never ending. It's just so terrifying.
One could argue though that like while her fear is heightening, it's also what gives her the ability and the clarity of mind to get the hell out, because eventually she just like twists out of it. It's not like she's under some such devious, like she's not in a saw trap. It's just some dude holding her down, and they're distracted trying to get the dad to, like, you know, they assume that she's like cattle, like she's essentially like, as you know, she's just livestock to them, so they're not paying that much attention to her. So she just like slips out and again just dives through a plate glass window, and like in another part of this movie that is just absolutely I want to say gorgeous cinematically, because it's not quite gorgeous, but it's so interesting and like a surreal, is that she bunches out this plate glass window, and we're delivered into what? Daytime. It's morning. She survived the night. But you're not expecting that, because it's just one of these movies where it just seems to be endless night. It's just horror after horror. So when she breaks out through the window, we think they're eating dinner, right? So she breaks out through the window and suddenly it's morning. Like, that's the craziest thing. They must be late eaters like me. But you know, like it's this really funny moment. They're also kind of putting her in this weird mom role where they have her sort of at the head of the table before they plan on killing her. It's almost like they want her to be, they're like the little Bloss boys, and they want like Wendy to play the mommy. Like, it's this very weird thing. So she like escapes out the windows, and then like that final sequence is one of my favorite horror movie like action sequences of all time, just because it's so realistic, not realistic,
terrifying.
It's terrifying, but it's also like something you could imagine seeing happen in real life, the way that you watch stuff on Twitter and you're like, oh no, someone got hurt at a protest, and here's the video. You can imagine this totally bonkers video of this guy chasing a girl, a car like hitting him,
cars
like
are kind of
car,
going
like that car stopping, then like this other guy coming out to chase the person in the car, them getting out, running around, like you know, like it's this whole a whole sequence of events that doesn't feel particularly planned out. And since it's now in the morning, it doesn't feel as, maybe it feels as threatening, but it feels like it gives you the sense that it is beatable. Like the brother just died, so now there's just Leatherface, and the people are stopping in the road, so it's not like just her horror anymore. Other people are seeing this, so it doesn't belong to her. So she's like no longer the only victim. You know, there are other men who are moving.
Yeah, absolutely. There's, you know, she's in the process. It also, now that you say that, it definitely does remind me of like a news segment, like high profile action. It's like you see in the news, like there's a high profile like car chase going in kind of situation. I almost feel like it kind of feels like that a little bit, like a different version of that, where it's kind of shaky, you know, and it kind of from that kind of point of view, but also it's also kind of annoying because I see, you know, her going into the truck, and the guy, Leatherface, clearly can't get in the truck. He's doing the X's on the truck door. My thought is, why aren't you driving away?
Yeah, that is just really.
Why didn't you drive away? And they thought, nah, let's not drive away in this truck that we're in. Let's just get out of the other side of the door.
You know
where he can chase us and see us, like,
because again, I think it speaks to the newness of this genre at the time.
Yeah.
Like this again, like we're saying, these slasher films were brand new. Just like the guy running towards the meat locker, like in the back, like and tripping. This is one of those moments that if you're so frustrated because we know the tropes, but in reality, you don't know what your body would tell you to do in that moment. It might be like, oh no, I hit a guy. You stop the car because you killed a man. And then suddenly somebody else is coming at you with a chainsaw. Like you just might just do the first thing that comes to your mind, which might be just dip, like just get a girl out of the car. Like you don't know. Like you might just exactly. Bolt. And it doesn't feel planned, you know. And
let's be honest. I mean, it's kind of a joke whenever you see a zombie movie or anything like that. Is that, or if you see, like, if you're running from a bear, you don't need to be the fastest runner. You just need to be the fastest person. You just need to be faster than the person next to you, essentially. Yes. And now at this point, she's not. You don't need to answer the most. She's running away with. She's running away with another person at this time. And so what's actually kind of interesting to me is that we don't really know what happens to that guy. We just see him running away. Yeah, he runs in that direction, and she gets into a car.
Yeah,
but.
And I always wondered what the guy in the back of the truck must have thought, because she jumps into the back of like a flatbed truck, and the truck just kind of speeds off, and the guy's like looking at her, and she just starts laughing. Like she's like hit this great point where she's just like manically laughing while like Bart and Bud like carry, you know.
Well, the thing is, what's kind of funny is that I like, part of me wonders is that she hit this breaking point, this absolute breaking point. Yeah, hypothetically. If the driver thing is, it's also visually confirmed because he sees the guy in the chainsaw and the mask when he's doing, he's just dancing with his chainsaw. He's like he's like jerk, he's like doing a little jig up there. He's like,
Is that like a dance because his brother died? I can't even tell what kind of dance that is. That's
whatever it is, he's dancing. The dude is like actively dancing. He's like swinging it in the air.
He's like doing a little play.
Yeah, he's just like moving it around. He's doing like a figure eight, all that good stuff. But thing is, okay, if the driver had not get a visual confirmation on Leatherface to confirm that she is actively running away from someone, I can picture the driver thinking to himself, "This woman is batshit crazy."
I mean, she's covered in blood.
She is actively laughing. Out of fear, out of paranoia. We don't know. Did she do something horrible? Yeah. Is it someone else's blood that's already covered on her, or is it her? I don't know. And so I could picture some, like, especially in a small town, Texas in the 70s. I can picture someone being like, "Oh yeah, let's put her in a mental institution."
Well, sure, but I think the upside is, like, I think especially back then, but like even more so now, like, or maybe less so now. If you see somebody like that, like, your first instinct, I hope, as a human being, would just be like, "Oh, somebody's covered in blood and they're fucking freaking out, and what happened to them?" Yeah. It wouldn't be to assume that they've hurt anybody. It would definitely be to be like, "Oh no, they need help," and like, let's at least get them out of this immediate area and bring them to the cops. This is a little dance. This is the little dance I do every night before bed. This is my little video Drew dance.
I could totally see that.
Just waving around my arms, just like,
ah! He's even doing a pirouette, you know?
He is. The thing is, chainsaws are heavy as hell, and he does not seem to be practicing like really good chainsaw safety. Like, I can't even tell if he's dancing or just calibrating his balance after swinging a chainsaw 360 away, like 360 around like a little windmill.
Well, that chainsaw in particular, that scene in particular, he didn't use a chainsaw with blades on it, so it's not that bad. But something there's to say is that like we kind of mentioned, he's not communicating with language or anything. But thing is, what his physical presence. The guy is actively chasing you with a chainsaw. He's a big guy. He's almost 7 feet tall. He's 6'6" or 6'7" or something crazy like that. And
it's 7 a.m. Calm down, Leatherface. It is 7 a.m. where you are. Calm down.
potentially, what is time? It could be evening. It could be like 6 o'clock in the 6 or 7 o'clock in the evening over there. I don't know. No clue.
We definitely know it's not evening. It's morning because they were going to have dinner and she survived the night. She didn't survive a whole. She didn't get knocked out for a day.
Or it's how do we know it was dinner? Do we know it's dinner? Was it mentioned it was dinner?
They're not making scrambled eggs. They're making barbecue and it's nighttime. And they say bring grandpa down for dinner.
Did they? I don't know.
Yeah, they mentioned dinner. They're not like making bacon. They're serving barbecue because it's Texas and it's 7 a.m. in Texas.
With the general adrenaline going on, time is like non-existent.
You know what the saddest thing is?
It's weird.
I've never thought about this before, but can you imagine what it's like? What this return home is going to be like for Leatherface when he comes back without the girl and with like I don't know. I don't think he can.
Yeah.
I don't think his ability to. They beat him, and he doesn't seem to have the ability to speak. Like the dad or the older guy, like they beat on him and they make him dress like this, and he seems to make animal noises and like these sad kind of grunting sounds. But I don't think he has the ability to speak. It almost sounds like his mouth is sewn shut or something. Like he's just kind of making like he's making these weird noises. That's going to be a horrible moment for that family.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's actually. Why that is a key conversation that's mentioned at the beginning of both alternate sequels. Is that because and the 2013 sequel, it's the director, I can't remember his name, but he like mentioned this is like an alternate sequel. This is an alternate timeline sequel where we're not acknowledging the Toby Hooper sequels. We're only talking about the first one. We're not talking about the second and third one. Okay. Right. Or the other mix. We're only talking about the first one. So this is definitely an alternate timeline, and it's mentioned at the beginning of the movie, and where the family is like that they're here because you didn't kill her. They are after us because you couldn't kill the girl. That's a whole conversation at the very beginning. Yeah, that's a whole conversation at the very beginning of the movie, during the shootout with the family. But in the sequel, in the Toby Hopper sequel, that's the reason why they left the small town. They end up getting an RV situation, and they end up creating this huge underneath like a park or something, or I don't even know what it is, under some kind of art installation or something like that. They end up creating this huge labyrinth underground. What? Yeah, you need to see it. It's so weird. I loved it. I loved it so much. But I'm sorry?
Is that the second?
It's the second. With Dennis Hopper in it. Dennis Hopper is in it. Yeah, Dennis Hopper. Yeah, he does a lot of phallic movements with the chainsaw as well. He has 2 of them. Yeah, he has a chainsaw thing. He's going up on his like thing. He makes a out of it.
Dennis Hopper.
It's so weird. It's so weird. But Lefty,
there's been several times this. Well, you know what? Go ahead with your statement. 'Cause my statement's a little bit off.
Okay, but it's okay. I just want to mention at the very beginning of the movie, it's mentioned again the reason why they left that small town, because the grandfather and the brother and the dad and the grandfather snuck in there again. Pale AF still. He's mentioned, and he's like sucking on the thumb, all that grossness.
Oh my god!
Oh, so gross, so gross. He looks like a bottle of cheese curd, of nasty.
For some reason, seeing him in daylight, which is not something. This must be from the sequels or an uncut scene, because you never see him in daylight, and there's a reason. Because like, woof.
Yeah. Also, he's like wearing a suit and tie, so he's like compared to everyone else, he's actually wearing real clothes.
It's because you're supposed to think he's a corpse, because you're supposed to think he's one of the buried corpses. So of course, he's wearing yeah.
Interesting. I didn't know that connection. That makes sense.
And he's like dressed like an old. He just dresses like grandpa.
Yeah, it is mentioned though in the second one and the third one. The reason why they left their family home was because Leatherface couldn't kill the girl, so they blame him.
Interesting. I mean, that's really interesting. I think there is something to that. This reminds me, and I'm now realizing that one of my favorite movies of all time, or one of my favorite franchise. What am I going to call this? Like a franchise hard left, like a change in genre franchise was the difference between Rob Zombie's House of a Thousand Corpses, which was like a pretty crazy horror film that like very much took from a lot of different other horror films and was like an ode to a bunch of them. But it was about a crazy family of like, backwoods hillbilly types, but also lived in a gigantic mansion and like were turning people into carnival freak show things. The difference between that movie, which was a horror movie, and the sequel, which is Devil's Rejects, which is a very different beast entirely, because that movie is about that family on the run from a corrupt cop who's like chasing them down and trying to torture and kill them. And while they still are the bad guys, they're definitely like the anti-heroes of the story, because they're still actively trying to like kill people, like just kill people, because that's in their nature. They're also the sort of Bonnie and Clyde on the run. They're on the run from the law, and the law is also corrupt. And they've got their family in different states who are like either sheltering them or selling them out respectively. And you're really on the side of this roving band of like, murderers, for lack of a better word. And that's not a horror movie. That's like I don't know what you'd call it, like almost like a thriller. Like it's like the supernatural elements of the first film are thrown out entirely, and it's just focused on this family as if they were just serial killers, that are now being persecuted and hunted.
Yeah, well, the thing is, in the second one, it's really weird because it's actually kind of, I wonder if it took a lot of the influence from these sequels. That premise is because in the sequel, it is a true horror comedy. I literally laughed out loud many a time watching the sequels. I did. But the thing is, in the sequels, though, they are actively killing people very, very regularly. But also, the people that are out to get them are also the Dennis Hopper's character that is out to kill him, because he is a relative of Sally and the guy in the wheelchair, because it's actually mentioned in the movie. They kind of have a little reunion in the movie where he's also actively trying to kill him as well. He's like a private eye or a sheriff or something, where he's working with the police, but he is also very vocally, he's getting a chainsaw and he is actively trying to kill and torture them as well. So it's definitely, there's no true hero in the movie. And that girl, like I mentioned, that ended up having like almost simulated sex, with Leatherface, essentially, who is very much a heterosexual male. He has a child.
He's wrong with his gender identity a lot. I feel like he's a male.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
His gender identity.
Yeah, but gender identity gender identity is different from sexuality. He also has a daughter.
I'm not sure if he identifies as a cisgendered male, but if Leatherface identifies as
sure, absolutely, that's absolutely true. There is he does have whatever the gender is, the preferred gender is. They do have a daughter, and not Leatherface and the woman, but Leatherface does have a daughter in the third one, and that's kind of mentioned. But anyway, like I mentioned, like there is a lot of movements where there is the making it seem like as if the chainsaw is like a phallic reference, for Leatherface for sexuality.
As a weapon goes, like in terms of the slasher weapons, and I know this is, we're kind of combining this into our favorite characters and scenes and lines area, because I'm just going to tell you straight off the bat, there is no favorite line in this movie, because you can't hear anything. The only good line is from Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3D. And again, it is "do your thing, cuz," followed by throwing a chainsaw, the guy catching it like he's Bruce Campbell in Army of Darkness. And
so good.
I love this weapon. Like out of all the slashers, all of the thing, out of Jason's machete, his mom's machete, out of like, the whatever else people have, knives, guns, whatever. The chainsaw is like such a baroque, like unwieldy sort of instrument, like an ice pick. I feel like is a couple movies, a minor thing, like is from like a Valentine's Day or whatever. But I love the chainsaw because it's something that it's almost like Thor's hammer. Like you have to be of a certain thing to wield it. Even it's a cumbersome instrument that you have to like have some upper arm strength. Like you can't just grab it like a gun and like shoot somebody. You have to you have to know what you're doing. At one point, Leatherface himself like gets himself like chopped up a little bit. He accidentally cuts himself on the leg with his own chainsaw because they are fucking dangerous. Like I don't want to mess with chainsaw. It's also really loud, which is the loudest of the sounds. Yeah, it's actually really, really funny you say that. Especially it's like you said, comparing it to Thor's hammer, because I had a very similar watching one of the ending scenes, the final scenes of Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 is that one of the final scenes with the woman
like I said, she's like finding her power again after being tortured, throughout the movie, is that she ends up taking a chainsaw and she ends up dancing and she's like, ah, and she has like, and she ends up like defending herself. It's really great. But the thing is, meanwhile, she is, it's almost like a worship statue. This woman, like a skeleton of a woman is actually seen holding a chainsaw, like in a throne, essentially. Their staircase. It's kind of a weird situation.
This is like part of their
it's like part of like you have to see the movie, lady. Oh my gosh.
I can't believe
please see the movie. I loved it. She's like on this like almost throne. It's like bathed in light. It's like surrounded by colors and everything. But anyway, the woman, she's running from the older brother of Leatherface, right? Who's trying to kill her. And she's like trying to claw away, and she ends up getting to this top of this tower thing where sits a skeleton with a chainsaw. And I think it's supposed to be their mother or wife or something, because of it's because he's like, no, don't touch her, no, and he's like, yeah. So it's kind of like there's that kind of relationship, like you are not worthy, essentially, like you can't touch something sentimental that's mine.
Yeah.
And she's having trouble. She takes it and she has a hard time revving it. And she ends up getting it going, and then he's like, "Oh fuck!"
Yeah,
and she ends up getting him back, and then she starts dancing, and she's like frantic, and she's like, she has this moment of complete clarity.
I mean, it must be like the sword out of the stone. If you realize you have the ability to wield a chainsaw, like my upper arm strength is shit, but if I suddenly, like in fear and panic, was suddenly able with adrenaline to lift a chainsaw above my head and do some damage, like I'd be like, hell yeah. Okay, this is what we're talking about. This is the first time we've talked about the context of favorite characters, scenes, and lines, and Alex has just gone on a essay about one specific scene that she likes a lot. Like I like that.
So good. It's so good.
My favorite moments of this movie are truly the ones that are counterintuitive, where people just act and the movie just acts in a counterintuitive way than conventional logic, conventional horror, conventional common sense would work, like running towards the danger, like, it being daytime when she crashes through that window, like you said, the guy like running out of his own car, like, it's just, it so plays into this idea that when you are at sheer fear or panic, people don't act in rational ways or even towards their best interest. They act out of panic. And like, it's this really, and when you're in a situation that is by its definition insane, there's no way to sanely react to it.
Yeah, when you're scared out of your mind, like you said, we don't always make the most rational thoughts. We do things based on instinct, what our gut is, what our, fight versus flight mentality. And, sometimes, it just comes down to what can you do right now so you can hopefully have a few extra steps to get away. And in Sally's case, in particularly getting away, that means like, getting out of that truck and everything. It's definitely I think it's arguably the most, that in the dinner scene is for sure the most iconic scenes of the entire movie. Yeah. It's just so terrifying overall. And plus I don't like to say that it's, I don't like to say it's definitely a relatable movie because, it's not common. It's not relatable to have this kind of experience. But something that is incredibly relatable is the absolute dread, the fear. Because these last handful of movies that we've had is that, the movie might be a little horrifying, but the absolute dread that you feel because it is a slasher that's kind of based in reality without these supernatural elements or anything. There is that, that there are serial killers out there, there's people that torture people and, a lot of these things. So it's, in theory, it is based in reality. Like you said, these characters, these cannibalistic families it's based off a real dude that had a nipple belt.
He did it. Wow, he did have a nipple belt, correct. Choices too. Oh, hey, thanks for the donation, Christopher. I did want to say one thing real quick. It says, before I saw Tom, my fourth grade teacher's Oh, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I thought I said Tom, and I was like, that's cute. Before I saw Texas Chainsaw Massacre, my fourth grade teacher's husband had his chainsaw kick back on a tree knot, and scarred his face. My reason for being scared. Yeah, I mean, chainsaws are one of those things that, like, I just, as a clumsy person, as a Drew walking around this world, I've never been like, no one offered me the chance to like touch his chainsaw ever. So, these, I do want to say, by the way, Lon's asking, do I have a room full of bone furniture? I, in fact, do. I love their aesthetic. Everything about like the way they decorate their home is like very on point to me. I'm like, yes, yes, yes. You have a little bird cage with a little bird skeleton in there. That's how you do it. Like, I used to do my own taxidermy. Like, it's just to the surprise of no. Yeah, exactly. To the surprise of no one, me and my sister took taxidermy classes and would, like, take out the guts and do all that. It's actually a lot of woman work. Like, it's a lot of what we consider women work to do taxidermy, because it's a lot of sewing. It's a lot of like scrape. It's a lot of cleaning animal like you would do for like cooking. It's a lot of like small little like artsy, crafty kind of things.
Yeah, it's very detail oriented.
Yeah, it's very detail oriented. It's very crafty oriented. So it does kind of feel like, besides the goriness of it being like a dead animal, like it does feel like a specifically feminine activity. I don't know. That's another thing. I will say that to my own thing, and I want to give this to Ferris as a thank you. I'm not sure if he's still in the chat, but as a, thank you for debating so well on my behalf on Schmo Debates, but also for the donations tonight, that I actually do know, in fact, how I'd react to a horror movie situation. Because we've been saying that, like, how you don't know how you'd react. I do. Because when I was I think I've told this story, maybe not on here, but when I was in middle school, right before I went to high school, I was friends with a very dramatic, crazy, very rich young lady named Jennifer, who had a big house in the middle of the forest, essentially in Elkton, Maryland. It was right on the border of Delaware and Maryland. I knew her from like summer theater camp, and she would have these big parties with all the rest of the theater kids. And she lived in a giant mansion, no oversight, no parents. It was very much like it was like right after Scream had come out, so she would hold these giant parties. And one time she was like, guys, I think there's like a cougar in our backyard. So like we made like a little scouting expedition at night and took like one of the dogs. We were just like surrounded by these woods and darkness. And out of nowhere, Ghostface comes out and is like running towards us with a knife and like chases us up this giant, she had this giant like 2-story tree house. So we're climbing up of it, and this guy's chasing us, and we were just like shaking we're children, whatever. Like, we're just terrified. We've seen this in a movie, but we've also seen the movie that it comes from, which is Scream. So like, what I do is I turn around and then I get to the top of the ladder and I just kick that motherfucker right in the face, and he topples down and breaks his arm. It turned out to be my friend Doug, and she was like taping it all. Jen was taping it to make it into like a little movie, because children are sociopaths. Scream is a much more relatable and much more realistic thing than we think about. But yeah, so I know how to react in a horror movie situation. I would definitely like just accidentally, like without thinking about like what the smart thing to do is, I just turn around and just kick that guy in the face and break his arm.
What?
So, yeah, that's how
terrifying.
Yeah.
When you described this whole thing, like rich lady in the middle of a forest kind of thing, I actually pictured the house and like forest set up from 3D. The rich lady in the house kind of situation. Like, that's what I pictured. Like, you're like running away in the house and everything.
But imagine the woods being the ones from the Blair Witch Project, because that's actually the woods that were surrounding our neighborhood, with like the Burkittsville kind of area. So like that was the woods.
I do know that you mentioned that the Blair Witch myth is like not even a thing though over there though. Realistically, it's not real. Yeah, totally made up for the movie.
Lost in the Potomac woods is definitely a thing. Like that's something that everyone's scared of. Just want to bring this back up for a second because it's just so good. Just for 2 seconds. That is to say that, like, yeah, who knows if you have like your sense about you, if I wasn't a teenager, if things didn't feel so much like a movie in that moment, like things felt unreal and felt like, okay, how would you react in a movie? I reacted how a character, like how Sidney Prescott in Scream would react, because she was always kicking those guys and they were always falling over because they were super klutzy Ghostface killers. But if I had just grown up on Texas Chainsaw Massacre or other Final Girl movies like from the 80s, I might have just thought the only option was running away, because it didn't become a thing of like fighting back until a little bit later on in the cultural tropes.
When I was in high school, I was like a freshman, maybe a sophomore in high school. I was standing outside waiting for one of my parents to pick me up from school. And there was a van came up.
Ooh.
A van came up. I'm like waiting. I'm by myself. Me, my little headphones, and I'm in my field hockey gear. Coming back from practice, and two guys were in the car. Two guys were in the car. They asked, "Hey, can you show us where the soccer fields are?"
Nope.
And I said, "Oh, it's literally right across the street, right there." At this point, they're like, I'm like 5 feet away from them because I'm at the curb waiting for my parents to pick me up, and so like literally like 5 feet, and they said, "Oh, can you just show us? We'll bring you right back."
Nope.
And I said, "No, it's like literally right there, and I like slowly like walk back a little bit because I see. You can see like the door pop open a little bit.
Oh my God, that's so cool, Alex.
Just a little bit.
Kids being
There's
kidnapped.
two. Thing is, I don't know. I'd say I don't remember looking, but thing is, I just see the door, the back door pop out a little bit, and there was no windows.
Yeah. Oh God, that's so
to
cool.
This car. But I walked back a little bit. And I said, literally, it's right there. And they're like, oh, it's no big. Yeah. Yeah. It's like, you can definitely show us. No big deal. I promise it won't be an issue. And I'm like, no, it's just right there. And I was like, yeah, sorry, I can't help you. And I just like walk back towards the school, like speed walking.
And I'm showing you is in the harbor because she just is too smart and she bounces.
I was like, F this. But it just kind of, but the thing is because of that situation, I remember I watched the movie Hostel for the first time when I was in college. And God. That movie is that movie is not about like a high school girl. It's not from the point of view of a girl or anything for most parts. But but the thing is it's the concept that people are being kidnapped and taken to be tortured. People are paying to torture someone else actively, where you're like, give me an age, give me a race, and give me a gender, and I will find that person and I'll find them to give to you so you can torture. And as a result, I kind of like kept thinking that whole situation that I experienced. And I was like, because I remember like a real genuine fear and watching it. And I remember watching Hostel, and it felt like that's saying, even it came up on Cinema Bias, even if like 20 people suggested it, I'm like, bring someone else on. I will not watch this movie under any circumstances. No, I just won't. Not again. No, not again. But it was just, so it was like, and knowing it was like it's all about gore. It's all about that. And it really scared the crap out of me. That whole idea of like like in another world, in an alternate timeline, I was kidnapped and horrible things could have happened to me. And it's really terrifying. So it kind of, it's like in these
logic. I mean, like, look, and I say that like, I know what I would do in a horror movie. That's not saying that I am smart when it comes to recognizing danger. It's like Ted Bundy, the serial killer. And this is a real story. This is not something that happened in the movie. This is not Scream. Ted Bundy would dress. He was a very handsome man, and he would dress like a policeman, or like a policeman or a fireman. He would look like a position of authority. He was very young. He was very handsome, and he would put his arm in a sling, so he looked like he was injured. And he would ask you to help him carry something to his car. And he was a handsome young policeman, being like, that's the kind of thing I could easily see my dumb ass being like, oh yeah, sorry, officer. Like, let me help you. Like, I have such a conditional thing about thinking authority figures are good people. And like always having good.
That's not just you. That's as a society. I think I think everyone does. I mean, we're conditioned to feel that way. Yeah. Place some certain comfort. Like you can't be in this position without being a good person, right? In theory,
been a real
but that's not true. Yeah, it's definitely a very. I think that happens a lot. But also, you hear it all the time with serial killers and stats and things like that. Serial killers and people with control issues, things like that. You know, a lot of times they go into law or positions of authority like security, law enforcement, things like that, because it gives them a sense of control. You know, going, yeah, yeah, and it's,
the madman,
and it gives them,
who's
yeah,
going
a sense of authority.
very similar mentalities. I do want to say, look, first of all, Lon, you're completely crazy. You're completely, absolutely insane. Ted Bundy was a really, really handsome man, and he could look like a lot of different. His handsomeness was sort of generic. It could kind of change the way, he could look different from different angles. He was very handsome. Zac Efron did a good job as him, but just Ted Bundy was a handsome man.
He was a handsome man. He's not hot and sexy, but by golly, he was a good looking guy. He really, really was.
Not to get too off topic, but Ted Bundy was an interesting one because there was not that much in his background that could point to this. Anne Rule, who was a very famous true crime writer, was his friend at the suicide hotline and never suspected him the entire time the murders were happening. That's what Strangers Beside Me is about. I mean, this guy just fooled everyone. And I'm just saying, I don't know if I have a smart sense of danger. I don't know if I have the greatest self-preservation instinct. I just know how to deal with scenarios that my lizard brain has conditioned to be horror movie scenarios. So I know what to do if a vampire has to come in the house, and I'm no.
It's actually funny you say that as well, because actually the killer, Buffalo Bill from Silence of the Lambs, he actually, in order to lure women into his car, he would pretend he would be in an arm, and it would be in a sling. He wouldn't be. He would be. He didn't have a cop's uniform or anything, obviously, but he had a uniform, a cleaner uniform,
a moving van kind of thing.
Yeah, a moving van kind of situation. And he's he's having trouble, and the woman comes over, and it's a guy that's clearly struggling. He has glasses, his arms in a sling, he's having trouble. Clearly, he's not in a situation to overpower you, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think that, look, Tom Harris was obsessed. I mean, he is obsessed with true crime stories. So, Tom Harris, took a lot of this. He took a lot from Ed Gein, but he obviously took a lot from Ted Bundy with that specific moment in the book and in the movie. He was there for the Monster Florence case. He went to Italy and studied up on this case of the Monster Florence. So it was terribly mishandled by the Italian detectives, and then put that as this background to Hannibal. It's that guy was real DTS, down to serial killer stuff. Hey, Robert Adams. I want to say we're not getting too off track here. I hope, but
yeah.
Now that I think this is the last Cinema Bias we're going to be doing this month of October. So you're off the hook now. So how's it feel having gone through this gamut of horror movies and forcing yourself to explore past your comfort level?
This has actually been probably the most. I'm actually quite proud of myself for getting through this month of horror. I still have more horror movies to watch, just because this is the first year that I've been you know what, I'm actively going to watch movies outside of my comfort zone, and that is horror movies. So outside of Cinema Bias, I've watched over 30 horror movies.
Whoa.
Yeah, I do.
Let's give us a couple. Give us a taste.
Okay, so a lot of them are older ones. I watched the original with Vincent Price, House on Haunted Hill. I watched 30 Days a Night. I watched Silent Hill and Silent Hill Revelations. I watched My Bloody Valentine and also the remake with the Jensen Ackles, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 1, 2, 3, and the 3D. The Crazies, the original and the remake recently. I watched Dark Water, the Japanese horror movie, as well as the remake with Jennifer Connelly. Yeah, Dracula. I watched one of the Dracula movies with Christopher Lee, as well as Bram Stoker's Dracula. It Follows, Dracula Untold. I love Dracula Untold. That movie was so much fun. Ooh, okay. Hellbound, Hellraiser 2 and 3, as well as the first one. I haven't seen the first one in a minute. And Night of the Living Dead, by George Romero, and Night of the Living Dead 3, the third one. I can't remember what the subtitle was. Elvira, Mistress of Evil, Mistress of the Dark. What?
I think it's Day of the Dead is the third one.
Maybe, yeah. I remember the poster. I don't remember the title totally. Suspiria, the second and third Blair Witch Project movies, Count Dracula, Antrim, Overlord, yo.
Yo, Overlord, so
I
crazy.
love Overlord.
Overlord
I
is
had
so
no
good.
idea what to expect with
That movie
Overlord,
is so bonkers.
but damn,
I still don't
I
even know.
loved it.
I think it was kind of based on the game, Escape from Castle Wolfenstein. I think it was kind of based on that, but it was
Yeah,
just so good. It was just so kinetic and like it was like Inglorious
yeah,
Bastards, but like if it was like horror, like it was so
yeah.
good.
I loved it. It actually watching that movie makes me so sad there's not more war horror movies, because now watching that movie I'm like it's so easy to make that connection, like
Yeah,
especially with soldiers coming back with PTSD and things like that, where how do you not, being in those situations of high stress, high anxiety, high terror and
have
fear,
you
how do you
have you
not
seen,
go,
have you
how do
seen
you not
Jacob's
tie that
Ladder?
to horror movies?
I know that Jacob's Ladder is
No,
it's kind of like,
no.
oh, I see Jacob's Ladder deals a lot with these themes and specifically with the theme of coming home from war,
Yeah,
seeing things and being like, well, do I have PTSD or am I like hallucinating
yeah.
because I'm crazy? Yeah,
Hmm.
really fascinating
It's
film.
I watched The Boy, The Poltergeist, first, second, and third one, and the remake from like
Sam
2005.
Rockwell. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, Fright
Oh,
Night
wait,
and the remake with 2011. I love Fright Night.
right, the Colin Farrell one. Now, see, I like that
I
one.
watched both of them.
I like both.
Both of
I
them.
like both
It's
of them
so
because
good.
it does a good thing the way that the Evil Dead remake did, where it didn't try to be like the
Hmm.
original. Like it's
Yeah,
not trying to be funny. The original is like very funny. It's a horror comedy, and the remake was
yeah.
like, screw that. This is like a pretty intense horror movie where like the vampire can be like, oh, you're not gonna let me into your house. Well, then let me just rip up like a pipeline and set your house on fire. Now you don't have a house, no problem. Like problem solved. Like I don't have to be
Hmm.
invited anywhere. It was like
It's
such a funny like way to deal with that issue. It's good.
there's like moments where it's funny, but that's just because of like the charisma of the characters. Like David Tennant is everything in that
Yeah.
movie.
Yeah, he knows
I love David Tennant. It's
really.
so good. It's so
Uh,
funny. It makes me genuinely sad we never got a sequel. It also makes me incredibly sad we never got a sequel to this because uh, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3D was actually it was pitched as a trilogy.
that would have been great. Just keep that going. Keep
Would have
that.
been,
I
but
would keep wanting to see that movie again, or to see that movie continued.
it. But the thing is, but the problem is that she didn't. What's that thing is? I think it would have been awesome. I would have loved to watch it. Thing is, though, it didn't make enough money. That's why we didn't get them.
Oh,
So,
yeah. I still like
so
to
it,
see that in
yeah.
universe on VOD. Like, I'd still think that there's a room for it, and it doesn't need to even be Leatherface. I think the idea now of this family is like so iconic that you could just keep going. I do
Mm-hmm.
say like, wait, so Lon's comment of cinema bias to Jacob Ladder scenario. When you see Jacob's Ladder, and maybe that will be something. It's not quite a horror movie, like in a traditional sense. So I think I could still put on the cinema bias list and make you watch it sometime. It's real good. Tim Robbins. It's such a good old movie, but like
Mm-hmm.
once you see it, you'll understand the phrase that I have on a T-shirt that says, "Is this another Jacob's Ladder scenario?" Which references a very specific thing that Jacob's Ladder does as a film and a plot thing that happens. And I have a shirt that says it because it's one of the things from How Did This Get Made? It's sort of like a reference now that's sort of like an in-joke about anytime like a movie gets too crazy or too off the walls, or if it involves any sort of like non-linear or like a narrator that's unreliable, you can ask, is this a Jacob's Ladder scenario? And so I can't wait to be.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's well, it's kind of funny. This has been like the month of this has been the month of horror movies. I was thinking about making sci-fi movies or maybe like family dramas.
Dude,
My for
family?
next. Mhm.
Yeah, let's do
That's
it.
me. That I'm like it's been Thanksgiving, so that's like what I was gonna do personally. I was like trying to decide between the two genres for the month of November, because
Yeah.
every month I'm trying to actively watch new movies in a genre.
Well,
Kind of
that's
thing.
actually brings us to a good point, which is like, what do you guys want us to watch? If you guys don't know, you can always subscribe to the patreon.com/VideoDrew, just like everything. And there's a tier where you can come on and discuss, like pick a couple movies. We have a letterbox that's a sort of ongoing effort that I need to give you some more suggestions for of movies that one or both of us haven't seen. And if you go through that list, or if you have some suggestions, you can come on, talk to us about one of your movies, like sort of expand our worldviews a little bit. I mean, this has been a very good month for me because big reveal, love horror films. It's my favorite genre. It's a year-round obsession of mine. It's the only thing that I really like, that in terms of movies that I actively seek out. Like I'll actively seek out different genres of television. In terms of films, I only kind of actively seek out horror films. I saw like a weird one the other day by Amy Steinmetz called She'll Die Tomorrow, or She's Dying Tomorrow, something like that. It was a very cool concept. I've watched a bunch with Lon. There's just a bunch of great horror out there, and I think we're in an era of this elevated horror where we can actually start taking, like, people are starting to take horror movies seriously as films, because they're actually doing interesting things. Even Trains and Automobiles. That's why, all the Thanksgiving movies could come in November. We could also start doing family films, like, I don't know, people have been mentioning Fast and Furious as being something we need to see. Neither of us has seen any Fast and Furious. Fast and Furious?
I've only seen the first one.
I've never
I do kind of want to, because I know Robert, he kind of mentioned, but it's like that it just proves that she has time to watch all these movies. To be completely honest, I would watch one, maybe two a night, depending on my time. So that's like it's really, like, for me, it's not that difficult if I watch one or two a night. So if I'm lucky, maybe two. But
like during a pandemic, like, what else are we supposed to do? This is the time to watch movies.
Yeah.
Like, what are you talking about? Yeah,
She Dies Tomorrow. Yeah, it's kind of fucking.
Yeah. I actually feel bad about myself. Sometimes I beat myself up because I'm not watching enough movies during this time of doing nothing. Like, I've started reading books again, and I have to feel guilty about it.
How dare you?
I'm like, you gotta get ready for this match. It's live. Maybe don't read the book right now.
You can read books. Actually, let me see if I can find something. 1 minute.
I'm reading a horror book right now about the Mariana Trench. It's called The Deep, like the guy from The Boys. I did not see that piece about Overlord being a prequel to The Boys, but I would very much like to read it. And it actually does make sense that, like, Compound V is like the substance that they're getting in Overlord. Yeah, it's the same concept. You're building a bunch of soldiers from, same thing. Book exists. Yeah, I don't know, man. Books exist. What are you reading? Oh, The Shining, great. But no, what is that?
No, it's 1,001 movies you need to see before you die. I actually marked a bunch of the movies that I've seen already, but I decided halfway through it I wanted to color code it.
Nice.
Color code it, like, based on genres. So I took out all. I took out all of my tags that I've seen.
What do you mean, like, chakras?
What?
Did you say you base them on chakras?
No, I'm gonna base them off, like, genres. Okay, so horror movies, or like war movies are gonna be tagged blue that I've seen. Green are gonna be like dramas. Yellow is gonna be comedy, that kind of thing. But I'm gonna be tagging pretty soon, like, all the movies that I've seen, because I did that with a few of my other movies, but they're all packed away, so I can't show you.
Oh, okay. Well, I think that's very cool. I'm currently reading a horror book called The Deep. I think it's by Nick Cutter. I love horror books as much as I like horror movies, but this one's getting a little too scary. I never really thought about how scary the ocean is, but the ocean is very, very scary if you think about it too much.
Yeah. I feel like that's like a whole. I feel like that's like that. As far as horror movies go, I'm actually really surprised that's not been more of a. I'm hoping it becomes a trend in the future.
I don't think horror movies. There are not that many of them. The ones like Event Horizon are very, very good. Movies that take place on open water are very scary, but they don't tend to be horror. They tend to be like thriller horror, like Open Water, or like The Shallows, or
47 Meters Down.
Yeah, exactly.
Drift.
No, guys, we don't have a movie, I don't think, necessarily on the docket for next week. So me and Alex will have to talk about that. I think we have a couple people that are in line to come on the show. I think Lon actually might be one of them. So that would be kind of cool. But yeah, so we have a bunch of stuff going on. But other than that, I think this isn't a good enough place to say, yeah, we're almost at 2 hours here. So why don't I'm trying to see if there's anything else. Blah blah. Nope, I think we're good. So yeah, why don't we say, Alex, where can we find you?
You can actually find me being part of the Call to Action, podcast group. You can find us on audio podcasts as well, like Apple, Spotify. I almost said Spottable. That's not a word. Spottable. That's not a word. That's ridiculous. I'm trying to see if I can find it right now. Yes. So you can find us like on Apple, all that good stuff. So we would really appreciate you give us a rating over there. please,
Okay.
and thank you. But you can also find me on Twitter at real_AlexMac. Tomorrow I'm going to be hosting a Schmoebates, Halloween-themed Schmoebates. So it's going to be so much fun. It's going to be between Adam Witt and Eric Barnes, aka Warfather. Guys,
Yes,
it's going to be so much fun. So much fun.
I love it. From my end, like, you know me, I'm here. This is like my channel. So please like and subscribe and leave a comment. That always helps. You can find me at VideoDrew on all social media. Mondays and Thursdays, I do the VideoChronic pop culture quiz right here at 9 p.m. Tuesdays, I do Cinema Bias with Alex at 8 p.m. Sundays, I do Live in the Dark at 9 p.m. over on this channel. On Fridays, I do at 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. I do Twitch. So that's twitch.tv/VideoDrew. And I'm doing now daily training sessions, essentially daily training sessions with my Patreon to get ready for this upcoming pay-per-view match I have, because I will be playing against Jen Kemp is the undercard for the Wildberries pay-per-view match on November 13th. So it's a good enough reason to come on by and join our training sessions. They're usually around 5 p.m. And on Saturday, I think I'm going to be hosting a little Halloween party. So that's going to be like a fun thing. I think that's going to be over on Twitch. We'll be watching movies, playing Jackbox games, eating candy, dressing up, being silly. We're going to do a lot.
Please do a watch along of Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2.
If it's on Prime, like this thing as a affiliate, like if it's on Amazon Prime, it's the regular Prime without having to buy it, I can stream it to everyone that I'm watching stuff with. So it's going to be really fun. Yeah, so I'm really actually looking to the Wit versus Warfather one. I'm gonna try to swing by after this other show we have to do. Time is like, I don't know. These past couple days, like I'm like getting booked minute to minute to minute. So I'm really happy to have this Cinema Bias time to just sit out and go, okay, time to watch a movie. And maybe next week, Alex, maybe it will be your turn, because you've missed a couple weeks in a row of us having to force you to watch more. Maybe your turn.
Well, technically, I did pick this movie for us to chat about.
Oh yeah, that's what
but technically, I did pick it. But it's like you were the one hosting.
It's not in your wheelhouse, so we'll see.
It was my first time watching it though. At the same time.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, guys, thank you so much for joining us. Have a spooky rest of your week. Don't forget to vote, and I love you very much. That's right. Bye.